Rand High Stadium. When you go back to some of those great years at your time at South, what are some of those immediate memories that come to mind for you, thinking about the times that you displayed your talent on these fields around the city?
Well, just thinking about me, I was just at Foster's yesterday talking about a game here at this stadium, talking about one particular player, Garcia Lane, how we were talking about how the situation with Ursula, how some kids that, not getting a chance to play their senior year, they may need that senior year, and it just brought a memory to me about Garcia Lane, how he didn't have any offers, anything, and, that senior year, it was an article in the paper about coming to see. If you want to see a lot of the scouts from different schools come to tonight to see the Rand Stadium to see South High versus Ursuline, to see Brian Merrill, Willie Green, Tyrone Ivey, Gerald Smith, and no mention of Garcia at all. And like I said, he didn't have any offers or anything. He played JV his sophomore year, junior year he played. And the first game we had here was against Ursuline. He had 5 touchdowns, 263 yards, and like 11 carries or 13 carries. And it's like, well, they're here to see Dallas, and him is like, well, who the heck is this guy? And it just kept going on from here at Rand Stadium. And every time I think about Rand, I always think about our first game that season, 79. That's when we went on to be undefeated. And we had just a lot of great talent on that team.
We're back with one more down. Today we had the legendary Garcia Lane, former quarterback, defensive back out of Youngstown South High School, class of 1980. Mr. Lane was an exceptional athlete, was the leader in general of the 1979 undefeated Warriors, who unfortunately didn't get a chance to test themselves against the rest of the state and see if they could have brought home the crown to the city of Youngstown that year. Mr. Lane went on to a magnificent career with the Ohio State Buckeyes, participated as a professional player with the USFL Philadelphia Stars and also with the Kansas City Chiefs. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Lane on today to get a chance to give us some background and, lay out who he is outside of a helmet, shoulder pads, and thigh pads. So I want to thank you in advance today for joining me and giving me the honor of getting to hear and listen to your story and your athletic journey. We like to begin our segments with, getting the feel of who the person is. A lot of the people that we profile are from the Youngstown area. So if you'd like to start off where your beginnings, where you grew up in Youngstown, and give us some insight into your parents and your siblings.
Okay, I grew up on the south side. It's called Wabash. It's right off of South Avenue. It's about a 10-minute walk to the south side swimming pool. I went to Williamson, I went to Hillman, and then I went to South. I had 3 sisters and my mom and dad. My father worked at General Motors. My mom, we had a store. As a matter of fact, when we started the Braves, the Willis Market Braves was the first name of the Braves. And I was 8 years old, and my dad told me, "You're playing football." And that's how my football career started at 8. I played from 8 years old down in Bonnie Rogers. And actually, to me, even from then to the pros, I got all my ability and everything that I came from that Bonnie Rogers. That's when I learned how to run, learned how to hit, and everything else. And getting, at 8 years old, wasn't no peewees. You went right with the big boys. And at 8, I was getting blasted. By about 10, I was holding my own. At 12, I was pretty much running running that league down there with the Braves. So we were a young team, but we got much better at that point.
Well, I came up in the Sammy Quickstop Penguins organization, so the little Braves were my enemies in my head, but end up being teammates and good friends with a lot of great guys from that organization. Knowing that your family was the founders of that organization, that means a lot to all of us that played and came up through that system down there, because a lot of great talent, a lot of great games, and a lot of exciting Saturday mornings down in that little valley down there.
Yes, it was. It was. I mean, the guys that came up in there, even the ones that didn't make it, in college or pros, there still was so much talent in Youngstown. It was just, I'm one of those that went a long way, but there was a whole lot that was just as good that didn't.
One of the things, as I was collecting my thoughts about what we might speak about tonight, we're a decade or more apart in generation gap, but the one thing that I always notice about the elders that came out of South, that came out of ran East from the 70s, the 80s, you guys had a different economic landscape than the latter generations. And that's expressed in the way that you guys dress, the activities that you participated in, the pride that you guys took in your academics. Yes. So my first question to you is, what, if you had to characterize that period of your youth, what were the foundations that made you want to look your best, perform your best, and excel in the classroom?
You know what? As far as school, my older sister she was she was like the valedictorian at South. She was 2 years older than me. We were like at stair steps. My oldest, and then my next, and then me, and then my youngest. And, she set the example for me with the grades. She was a straight A student, because I actually graduated as an officer. Well, I was the secretary of the National Honor Society. And I graduated with my tassels on, so I was very proud of that, which also helped me when I got recruited. With the grades that I had, I pretty much, even from West Point, I was recruited by everyone. And that just kind of opened up an avenue for me with the grades. My dad and mom stayed with us. They kept on us, and we were, and we worked at the store. As we came up, we didn't just, I used to practice and go for practice and have to put up stuff at the store, put up food and stuff for, deliveries. So that kind of got me organized as a young man, and it kind of followed me throughout my life.
And, when I hear you say that and kind of touch on those things that were put into you as a youth, would you just describe your parents' parenting style as discipline, or was it love, hard work, or a combination of all of those things?
It was a combination because, one thing about my father, he never played football. And here he is starting an organization. And he pretty much, I thought I was doing real good. He couldn't really say much negative because I was doing real good. But he wasn't doing much positive either. Like, I'm having a great game. And he was like, well, when you get to junior high school, though, you ain't going to be able to do that. And then when you get to South, he would always say that, and I get to the next level, and I would at least hold my own at the minimum.
And so with you being part of an organization that's in its foundations and its beginnings, you did make reference to the mix of children in terms of age, and subsequent errors. My error, it was always 2-year age gaps and a weight limit.
Right.
And then, you made reference to that early part of that experience and how you were faring as you were leaving out of that youth level of football. Did you get all of your tempering at that level and kind of come into your own, and were you more confident going to the higher levels, such as junior high football or high school football?
Actually I was, because I had, by the time I was 12, I wasn't afraid to come up and hit. I wasn't, just like I wasn't afraid to shoot through that gap on a run, straight up the middle, because if you get through that gap, I'm looking to score. That's what happened when we played Ursuline. Once I got in the secondary, it was over. But I kind of kept that temperament of, I felt like I was able to be at each, even into the pros. When I made it to the Chiefs, I'm sitting here like, well, you know what? I feel like I belong here, because it's not like they're overwhelming me, because I can fit right in.
Now, us guys that come from Youngstown and, especially the South Side, we tend to form lifelong bonds and really tight friendships with the young men that we came up with. For you, who are those guys that are, your allies and your backbone of your inner circle through your formative years? I
mean, for me, like Brian, like I said, Brian Murrow, me and him was real close. We was Willie Green, we were all real close. I always like to tell people though, when it came to South, by the time I got to South and Stoops became our head coach, I literally only started 1 year at South, and that was my senior year. I alternated as a junior, and as a senior, like I said, the 5 touchdowns, because a lot of people used to say, whatever happened to Bogey? That was my nickname from Bonnie. Well, that's my nickname anyway, but they knew me as that in Bonnie Rogers. But they used to say that because I was kind of quiet and intense. I was on JV, actually, JV, and I was the quarterback on JV and ran over I ran wild in JV. So by the time our quarterback left my junior year, going into my senior year, they took the best athlete available, and that's how that got me going.
When Coach Stoops takes over, and the quarterback before you would have been Greg Brown.
Yes.
He had a great season his senior year, and that team put up a very respectable record. If you can remember back to you transitioning from 11th grade, and now it's your time to shine. How is that experience for you stepping into that role as the quarterback after, kind of moving around from receiver to defensive back, but now you're expected to take more of a thinking person's role and be the first point of information for the rest of the team on that side of the ball? What was that experience like for you going into the beginning of that?
It was kind of like, for me, I thought to myself, I got one of the best receivers in the state, which is Brian Murrow, and one of the best tight ends at Willie Green, Tyrone Ivy at tailback. I had a lot of weapons, so maybe just like let the game flow and let them, maybe that'll help me out, letting them get going, which, like I said, I didn't know so early though, because right away I ran that long touchdown. So that kind of like Stoops was like, oh, he can run, I mean, he literally called it 4 times in a row in one series, and I was like looking at him on the sidelines like, we got Tyrone right here and Brian Murrow's out there, but it kind of came easy for me after that, because then we were able to get them going, and that's when we just started rolling as a team.
We've had various guys from different eras out of South. We've talked to Julius Lavis, who was one of the first Black quarterbacks there. I think James Latier was the very first. And, he kind of described his experience and stepping into that role during the middle part of the 60s. And some of that was on the heels of, some of the political things that were going on in the nation in terms of civil rights. Later on, towards the end of his experience, they had to go through those days when Dr. King was killed. And, he just kind of describes what the area was like, the neighborhood and the atmosphere of those games, and how people still galvanized and bonded together to support each other. You talk about, maybe not getting as much playing time as you would have liked as an underclassman, but breaking out with a statement game, that very first game of the season against, the Northside Catholic School, Ursuline Irish, and your first carry is a touchdown. Does having a game like that right out the door, does it set you up to want more of that? Or for some players, a big game like that could make them complacent and maybe underperform what their ability was. What are your thoughts on that in relationship to having a tremendous game to start the season?
You know what? I actually said to myself, I went home that night and I said, we beat them like we did, which not only that, but that showed our defense was great that year also. And that was 3 years under Coach Stoops. Each year we got better. And my 10th grade year, we were 6-4. My 11th grade year, we was 8-2. And then my senior year, we was 10-0. But each year, them guys were getting more experience from my class with that technique and defense that they brought in there. And, after that first game, and I'm saying to myself, Brian Murrow really didn't even get going. And Tyrone Ivy didn't even get going. And Stoops pretty much seen what I could do and then just let me go. He turned it loose. And that means whoever our next game, they're going to have a lot of different weapons coming at them, which we did. And we just got to roll them from there.
Certainly winning is contagious. And when you get into those periods where maybe you have a good, successful season the year before, or you begin to put together a string of games where you're knocking off teams that maybe some people didn't think you had the ability to beat, that just kind of feeds and empowers young men to see how far that they can push that. You brought up the running back Tyrone Ivy, and I believe you guys had Scott Ivy on the team as well.
Gotti made All City that year also. Yes, he did.
And then you also have other guys like Arthur Beck who are able to come in and still not miss a beat. What is it like to have that type of talent pooled into one place in a landscape where there's, great teams throughout your league, throughout the area, and right outside of our region? You guys take on Ursuline, you take on Warren Harding, go up to Erie and get a win, and then you have to come back and contend with some of the toughest games on your schedule right within the city series. What are your memories about some of that slate through that 79 season for you and your guys?
For me, I remember that Warren Harding game. That was if any game, that was one team that really they kind of took me out of it. When we ran options, they'd have two people hitting me, not one. And wait, they were saying Garcia's not going to beat us, which I didn't. But they hit me every play. But then again, Tyrone had a good game, but Brian Murrow just stole. He ran the kickoff back. We did a flea flicker, and he caught a bomb against him, and I think it was only like 13-6. And he scored them both. But that's when I seen, we're learning how to use our talent, and so I guess that was one of the years too that most teams in the city knew at the end of the year who was the best. You might win the city, and there might be a year where they won the city, but we were a better team. I don't think there was a doubt that year that who was the best team in the city.
And with playoffs beginning in 72 in Ohio, when you guys are getting to the latter stretches of that season and are looking at some of the pairings, was it evident early on that you guys were going to be left out of that, or did it come down to the wire before you guys knew that you didn't make the cut?
It came down to the wire because our last game was North, and we beat them like 52-0. And we were just, we did all we could do. And basically, I remember when they told us we didn't make it, and they kind of said because we played a couple of division teams that was lesser than with the other guys. And it's like, well, the only thing a team can do is win all their games. There's nothing more we could have done.
And, what are some of the emotions that come with, knowing that you guys are so good and really riding high on a high note and not getting able to prove it the rest of the way when other teams do?
For me, I said to myself, I know there's a lot of teams that were glad they didn't have to play us. We were able to play the big teams. I'm talking about the teams with the big lines, because we had big guys in there. They were shooting gaps and very disciplined guys on both sides of the field. And for any team, like Warren Harding found out, like Ursuline, we were very disciplined in our defense, because like Warren only scored 6 points on us. I think Ursuline only scored once on us also. And so I think they kind of, I don't know how it went, because we were just sitting there like they knew who the better teams were, who the better team was, or whatever. Because actually they did change after that. They changed their system, because we beat some good teams, ranked teams at the time when we beat them.
Some folks that have had that experience of postseason play, unless you win the title, you kind of end on a sour note.
Right.
For you guys kind of have over the test of time, you've been able to preserve not having a blemish on your record. At this stage of your life now, when you look back on that, how proud are you of leading your team to that undefeated record and being the first team in school history to achieve 10 wins?
That's actually my number one, because for a lot of people, you can say, that can't say they were on an undefeated team. That's one of those kind of years that everything goes good and everything goes right. You may have those. We had two close games. We had a couple close games. We beat those games we had to win, and the other games weren't so close, but still, I knew especially when, and they did it right in the city. We had 10 people make all city, which we should have. We had a couple juniors, Scotty and Dave Collins. We had a couple people make it, as juniors, and they, at least the city kind of recognized us for our talents.
During your era, who were your main rivals in the city series? I know the South Rand thing was always heated just by proximity of sides of town, but some years Rand may just not be as good or able to put up a fight. So it kind of changes for different guys for different eras. Who would you identify as your tougher games, or the games that you really got excited for when you played city competition?
Well, first for me, it was Rand, and Rand was pretty good that year, but my parents went to Rand, and most of my family went to Rand. I had an uncle, Lorenzo Wilson. He went to Rand. He won the state 100 meters like 2 or 3 years in a row at Rand. So half our family was rooting for South, the other half was rooting for Rand. Then I had a first cousin playing for Rand at the same time. So that was like a big rivalry game for the family. And that was one of my best cherished thoughts is when we played Rand. Early in that game, one of the linebackers hit me, knocked me through the fence. I was on the track. When I got up, I had to walk back around through the gate to get back on the field. And I think after that, I ran for about 2 long touchdowns against him. So,
those two schools are the beacon schools because they're the first two in the city school system. And that rivalry stretched back all the way to, 1911 is when South is started. And they had been playing, every year. You guys are the only two that have a stadium on your school grounds. Can you talk about, what that's like to, 1 year go over into their territory and then another year have guys coming into South High Stadium? What was that atmosphere and that experience like for you, leaving your neighborhood, coming down to the school? Maybe you stop across the street at Red Barn, eat something you ain't supposed to eat.
Right.
But what was that like, game day to be able to come out of the field house, charge through that fence and be on your home field?
Oh, it was wonderful though. When you came out there and you see all your fans, the students there, and early on they used to chant for us 3-0, 4-0 each year, like they knew we were going to be undefeated. And we that was one of our chants though. We come out there and I get, especially Rand, I get to run over there because a lot of them guys I played against at Vonnie Rogers, they played for McCullough Williams, and so I played and knew a lot of the guys. Like I said, I had family over there, and then I was a track man, and we ran track against them all the time. So I enjoyed playing with them, but it was a good rivalry, a big rivalry for me. I think I asked my mom who was she rooting for. She said, I'm rooting for my son, but I'm rooting for Rand.
When you talk about your era of growing up and, being immersed in neighborhoods with successful middle-class Black families and, kind of having more opportunities or more activities and resources in the city at the time, what is that like to be able to kind of go from this side of town, that side of town, this neighborhood, that neighborhood? Were there any negative fallouts from you being a a noted player at that school when it came to maybe seeing somebody from East, maybe seeing somebody from Rand, or did everybody generally respect each other and get along during that period?
Oh, we got along. Everybody got along real good back during then, and like that for me, it was I was always quiet, even when I was notarized and at South. I was the same person when like I said, to only start when you hear my name, you would think I started 3 years at Ohio State, but I only started 1 year at South. You know what I mean? And so that kind of humbled me in the way, though. I respected, because I was in awe at Rain. They had some great athletes. Terry Taylor was one of the best athletes I ever seen. When you could see how he ran and jumped, and with speed and athleticism. But we fit in the way I knew I fit in good with all of that. But the environment for me was real good, and I got along with everybody real good, and plus, like I said, as a good student, that opened doors for me, and so everything pretty much went good for me.
In these modern times, we live in this digital age where the young men that are going through this process that you and I have already experienced, they have more outlets to get their name out there and be seen in a wider network and a wider landscape. I think, during the time that you were coming up, and for myself as well, a lot of your prospects were regional. Some teams didn't really come clear across the country unless you were that guy, the Ted Bells, the AJ Jones of the world. Yeah. And you were kind of earmarked your experience based on maybe Pittsburgh, maybe down to Columbus. Hopefully, maybe you go across the line and go to that other team that's up above us. For you, kind of getting your shine later in your high school experience, what were some of the opportunities that you had on the table before you chose to sign with the Buckeyes?
What I looked at, Michigan pushed hard for me. They came after me. Iowa was a big one because of Stoops' connections. Stoops actually had two nephews that played for Iowa, which are just both of the Stoops that coached. The one at Kentucky and the one that was at Oklahoma was playing for Iowa back then. And so they flew me down there, and what's his name? He played for Rand. He was the big star at Iowa.
Dennis Mosley, yeah.
Dennis Mosley, yeah. He was a senior when I was at South. So when I got down there, he was the big man on campus, and they had him take me around. And I enjoyed it, but I just didn't want to go to Iowa, But then with like I said, with my grades, I was recruited by a lot of Penn State. Then you had, like I said, all the Naval Academy, all the academies that recruited me, and letting one thing about them, you go to academy, you're set for life, because they take care of you and this and that. But I thought about everything, and I wanted to go somewhere where my parents could see me and my sisters can come down. And as a matter of fact, because I went there, I told Earl Bruce when he recruited me, he asked in my front room, I said, look, my older sister, she always wanted to go to Ohio State. And when he found out she was a straight A student, he said it wasn't hard to get her scholarships, and she was going there with me, and she didn't have to pay a dime to go. They had all kinds of scholarships she qualified for.
That I've been in the Columbus area for the better part of 25 years. My older sister attended Ohio State coming out of high school as well. That transition from a city like Youngstown and then coming down to Columbus on this big stage when it comes to football, what are the first days for Garcia Lane like, as you get on campus and kind of acclimate to Ohio Stadium and the tradition that had been laid before you?
What they did for us when I got down there, they had the freshmen come in about a week early to get used to campus. We got in a week before the upperclassmen got there, so it was just us. We all got, we were all together, and so we was amazed at the size of the weight rooms and the fields and the practice facilities and all that. And then when the varsity members came in to see their sizes, oh my goodness, and their speed, and because we watched them do their training drills, it was like, well, all I could do is my best. And
you start off on the offensive side of the ball. I'm sure some of that had a lot to do with how you performed as a scholastic athlete. Did you think that was going to be your track for the duration of your career, and that you would blossom into an offensive star at the school? Or did you always feel like a defensive player at heart?
No, I got there, and as I went as a receiver. I played behind Doug Donnelly, he was a senior though, and as a flanker. And what I used to enjoy though was when I was on scout team though, we had our whole secondary were seniors, four seniors, and they used to have trouble watching me. I was that quick guy. You try to press me, you're gonna have problems. And they were pretty good. We had three all Big Ten defensive backs out of 4. But like I said, they were all seniors, and I was comfortable as a receiver until that spring when they moved me to defensive back. I'm thinking I'm getting ready to get the shaft, because I am up to be fighting for a starting position the next year, and they're putting me at actually safety. I went to safety. That's that first spring I was there, and I'm like, now I'm third or fourth team. But by the end of spring, I'm a starter.
And what do you attribute that to in terms of knowing what beats inside of your chest, and taking advantage of those opportunities and getting better, and just showing what God had given you in terms of ability and talent? How did you feel about that rise and that transition? And then what was the statement, if you can think about that time in your life, that you wanted to make, and the legacy that you wanted to leave as a player there?
I was fortunate though at South we had our DB coach at South was Roland Smith, he was real good with all the guys. And he played, I think he may have played in the pros too as a corner. Yeah. And, I did, even though I didn't start at South and at the secondary, I still was there with them, working out with them. And because one thing about me, when I was on my own, I ran and I did a lot of drills on my own that I learned from others. And then I was fortunate, like I said, when I got to Ohio State, that first spring when I went to defense, that was because of Nick Saban. I was telling you, Nick Saban was my first defensive back coach, and he's the one went to Earl and said, "I want him on defense," and back, and went from there. And Nick Saban he's a heck of a defensive back coach.
You certainly left your mark there. Myself, as a former defensive back, I know how difficult it is to catch on to the position and kind of adjust to the levels of athleticism at that college level versus the high school level, because the scheme is a little bit more intricate. You're exposed to guys that can do things that you may not have seen guys in high school be able to do. And then that degree of separation between what's a starter and what's a backup is very, very minute, and it can change week to week when you get on that college level, depending on what the needs of the team are. You rack up a 189 career tackles and 6 interceptions, but you also make your mark as a punt returner and, go down in school history as one of the best to ever do it there. When you think about some of the games and the ability to have a eye back to the past and just see how many great guys that you faced off against. I looked at some of the clips and I saw you playing against John Elway. As you move to the pro level, you're playing against Hall of Famers like Steve Young. And you also play against some really great teams that, for periods of time had been forgotten about. You guys battled Navy in a back and forth game during your career. When you think about, all of the people that you crossed paths with or had to compete against, what does that do when you measure that against who you are and what you were able to accomplish?
I one thing I like, let's go to like Michigan. When we played Michigan, they had one of the best receivers in the country named Anthony Carter. And he was, whenever we played I've seen him as a freshman. My freshman year, I watched him just tear us up. He scored a couple times against, like I said, that secondary we had was all Big Ten. And I'm sitting here watching him just eat us up. But the next 2 years, we played Michigan. My sophomore and junior year, I had to go where he went. That was my job. Wherever he goes, you go. And we beat him. These are the gold pants you get for beating Michigan. I got one in 81 and 82 against Carter. And the funny thing about that is my son played for Ohio State the year that Ohio State was number 1 in the country. Michigan was number 2. And they had me and Anthony Carter, on a 2-way talking about our time together. And I enjoyed the way he respected me because I knew he was a great receiver at the time. But he kind of let me know that I was a hell of a defensive back. So that kind of made me smile a little bit.
And with you kind of touching on that, sometimes when I evaluate kids that I see and how they go about what they consider getting better or getting an opportunity, sometimes I feel like I might come off as very critical, and a younger guy might say my viewpoint is based on hate, but I think it's just based on, what was valued during the time that I played.
Right.
It was always about wanting to compete against the best person that you can, get better. And, we didn't really seek attention, but, the validation was, what did the guys that you played against think about you and your performance? And if you got a compliment from your competition, that was more valuable than being validated from someone from the outside, maybe a reporter, athletic director, coach, or what have you. What do you think about the change of the game and how it's played in this era versus, the traditional era that you grew up in?
It's so much different. I had, and another thing about, validation with me was, especially at Ohio State, was when I was elected as a captain also. That, I go back every year for that. I'll go back to meet the new captains. And like I say, my son, me and him will go back together. He wasn't a captain, but he's been in Columbus, the whole time also, and keeps up with the Buckeyes. And we go down there and watch them scrimmage when it's closed and everything. But, it's like we all, like I said, when I came in as a freshman at Ohio State, we were together. And we were together when I graduated. Well, I didn't graduate. I was there. I left there. I left to go to the pros. And here all my kids graduated from college, but Dad. But, like I would say this, nowadays, you play 1 year at Navy and the next year you're playing at Ohio State. and you can't, you don't get that. I don't think you can get that camaraderie like you can when y'all go together, and you couldn't transfer because you had to sit out. So we didn't have all of that, and so it's not the same for me. It's not even the same for my son Sean when he played in 2005. With this is kind of new. It's what 3 or 4 years, 5 years with this portal. It's good that you can win with a whole different team, but it's I can't imagine somebody who thinks he's up to start next year, and then they bring somebody from another school, so and paying them. So
yeah. When we were speaking the other night, you talked about your experience of culminating your college career with the bowl game, and then pretty much transitioning into the USFL, which was, a burgeoning league that was stocked with plenty of talent on the level of NFL guys level. Can you tell me a little bit about that transition of you're playing as a college player, and then not too long after that, you're right in the midst of this pro experience. What was your time with the Philadelphia Stars like for you?
Yes, I had my last game was 1984 Fiesta Bowl, and we played University of Pittsburgh, and we beat them. We beat them. Keith Byers ran the kickoff back in a close game. We beat them, celebrated, enjoyed as a team, and me and 3 others flew out to Japan. I played in the Japan Bowl and got the phone call. I think I was in Japan. They had a draft, and they told me I was drafted. I was actually drafted by the New Jersey Generals, and the Generals traded me to the Philadelphia Stars. They traded my rights for Lawrence Taylor's rights. So the Generals never signed Lawrence Taylor, but he used them maybe as leverage trying to get more money in the NFL. But I did sign for the Stars, and, I went. It was, first of all, not only that, but my new defensive back coach that played with me, because at Ohio State, his name was Dom Capers, who also was a coach in the NFL at some time. But he went to the Stars, and he told them about me. They asked him if you could have 1 or 2 players from Ohio State, who would you take? And I was one of them. And when I got to the USFL, I actually thought Ohio State was just as good as some of the guys there, because, I'm coming from a heck of a team also. But I knew that the talent that we were playing against was tough, and it was. I enjoyed it. I won 2 championships with the Stars. We went actually 18-2, for the whole thing. And we had a great team. And I guess for me, everything kept on going. I made all USFL both years. I led the USFL in punt returns. I ran 2 punts back, one each year against the Generals. And, and that just actually kind of propelled me into the NFL.
When you're a young kid, people have that aspirations of being the top of the top. Young boys and younger players think, they're going to have their chance to get their name called in the draft. They're going to be first round. They're going to play for their favorite team. They're going to be a Hall of Famer. Having a lot of conversations with men that have played professional sports in different eras, different sports, there's an element to that where it's not about the fun anymore. It's not about the dream, but it becomes more about the business and the work. For you, for a person that's out there hoping, dreaming, preparing, what is the other side of the reality of what professional sports comes with from your perspective and your point of view?
I was kind of naive to it when I first got there. like I said, I recall watching the practice. We were at a practice, and somebody made a play or something, and I said, I asked another guy, what was that? What call was that in? And he said, he looked at me and walked away, and kind of had me dumbfounded. And the guy come up to me and say, "Man, y'all play the same position. This is a job. He's not going to help you win his job. That's a job you may take from him." And I kind of look back at him and say, "But if he's better than me, then he's better than me. But to me, I would have gave him, I'd have let him know if I knew, let the best man win. But I got it. I get it. This is a job. This ain't just, you just feed your kids and everything."
And then, what is it like with that mix of performance, money, recognition? How does that fit for the younger version of Garcia Lane when you have a little bit more access than you may have at different points of your life? And then, how do you temper that or measure that against the backdrop of how you were raised and the community that you come out of? What is that journey like to all of a sudden get paid, be on television, but still know that you're from this Youngstown area and you have great parents and you have friends that are hoping that you achieve and wanting you to do well, but then you're out there in the wider world with the people that may be partying, the women that may be targeting your pockets? How does that fit with your experience through that pro journey?
It was a learning lesson for me. As I came up and started getting paid, it was, you want to take care of your family, and then you want to show your friends. Well, you not that you want to show them because you're the same, but you have more money at the same time, and so you're doing a lot for a lot of different people. But like for me, Youngstown, I enjoyed coming back to Youngstown and letting people know though that what, when Garcia Lane was Terry Taylor, all these guys, man, and to me, the guys in Bonnie Rogers I played with, I go back to my days there more than I do playing for the Chiefs and everything. But as we go, I end up getting hurt for the Chiefs, and that's where the business part comes in again. Because once you hurt, they paid me while I was hurt, but as soon as I got healthy, they released me, and once they released me, pretty much I couldn't go anywhere else because they knew I was hurt for the Chiefs. It's kind of like that's about it for you at your size. But even going back to Youngstown, though, I came back here and got around my friends and everything, and I enjoyed being back here. But you still got the rest of your life, and that's when you got to figure out what you want to do with your life. And at first, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that's when I decided, coming back to Columbus was a great thing that I did. I'm glad I came back here, and I like going home, seeing my parents, but I do like it down here in Columbus.
As you make that transition out of athletics and you begin to take on the other roles that are important in your life in terms of fatherhood, being a husband, and then finding yourself and your path for what you're going to do post being a football player. What is that part of your life's journey in terms of growing into fatherhood? And did you base your parenting on how you were raised, or did you just figure it out as you went along for yourself?
You know what? I kind of did a little mix of both, because like I said, I have 6 kids. I got 4 boys and 2 girls. And I'm proud that, my kids, 5 of them out of 6 graduated from college, and 2 of them got their masters, but they were good athletes too. All 6 of them were. And I think I quietly I quietly just enjoyed watching them grow up. And I didn't really I didn't say much to them as far as sports, but I kind of encouraged them and let them feel their ways like I had to feel mine. And I thought they did a good job. But and it also helped me as I grew older too, though, to watch them. Now I got grandkids, so it's like everything is a different step. But now the grandkids is graduating from, my granddaughter just graduated last year, two of them. It's so it's like it was a process for me. But now I'm watching my kids raise their kids.
And how much pride do you get out of that? Because certainly that athletic prowess is spread to that further reach of the family tree. Your grandson was one of the phenomenal track athletes down in this area in Columbus. Your boys performed very well on the high school level and had their college opportunities. When you see that next generation kind of carrying on your name, and you already know what the excitement is before they get to experience, and you watch them grow and develop in that, and then transition out of it and kind of step into those elder statesman roles. What does that do for you when you look at the totality of who you are up to this point?
Yeah, I enjoy that. That's what I enjoy the most. I get to sit down and watch my kids, and grandkids play and be fathers and everything. And then even my granddaughters, they're doing good. I went and watched my granddaughter. She's a 10th grader, and she's doing good. So I encourage them, and just I'm kind of like quiet, but I want to be there for them to watch them grow and everything else. So it's a blessing for me.
And you're on this 30-year career in your job, and almost at the point where you can see your way out of having to work on a daily basis if you choose. What is that consistency in a 30-year career at your job? How does that make you feel in comparison to some of the places and the heights that you've been in other arenas?
That's one of my bigger moments also, though. Right now at my job as a driver, I'm going on 31 years, and this is it for me. This will be my last year. So I'm winding down, but it's something that you do. Them 30 years took care of my kids. Them 30 years, just got me through life, and now I'm watching my kids do good for themselves and with their families. But I say, my youngest son was one when I started. That's Omar. He's a successful track coach here in Columbus, and he won the state at Bishop Hartley in Columbus. He was a track man, and here he is, coaching now. So it's now I'm winding down at my job, and that'll give me a little more free time to watch him do his thing and coach, and watch my grandkids and everything.
And if you think about what you just said there, what is the greater metaphor in all of that, in your opinion?
Well, for me, it's like I said, the whole ground thing for me was, football, playing ball for me, and with my mom and dad, because that kind of propelled me in my life. That got me disciplined and going to practice, going to school, studying hard. And for Garcia Lane, all of that was a part that made me a part of my life. And, going to Ohio State, getting my sister down there, getting, and turn around and hear my son goes to Ohio State, and he graduated, and he's doing great down in Columbus. He's in real estate. And watching all our kids, and like every Michigan Ohio State game, we go to Sean's house, and we got our colors on, and it's like I'm quiet, but I enjoy still saying, when it comes to Youngstown, I do remember when somebody had said when I got that first game at Ursuline, whatever happened to Garcia Lane? Well, they didn't call me; they called me Bogey. Whatever happened to Bogey? And then after that game, that they knew who my name was, though. But that kind of got me excited and made my day.
You are one of the figures in Youngstown lore that has stand the test of time. The things that you did on the gridiron and other athletic pursuits around the city. People still talk about those things to this day. You've had a lot of great experiences, at the youth level, at the high school level, on the grand college stage, and even in the pros. If you had one more down, though, to repeat or do over for yourself, what would that be for Garcia Lane, and who would be a part of that? Can you set that picture up for us?
If I had one more down, if I had one more down, though, I think I would have graduated from Ohio State because, like I said, when I left to go pro, and once I made it in the pros, and when everything was done, I went straight to, and I didn't go to where I'm working now. I went and did a couple different jobs. I went to San Diego for 4 years, and then I went back to Columbus. But I wish, because I was a senior when I left with the B average. So, and then, leaving there, I wish, because I did impress, and not impress, but let my kids know the importance of graduating. And here they are, they all graduated, but my oldest didn't, but the other 5 right after that, they got their college degrees. And I was there when they got them, and I'm very proud of them. And, I did put it, that was my part of me saying to them, I would love to see y'all graduate. And they did. You got the thing where Sean and Ben actually played against each other at Youngstown Stadium in Ohio State. And like I said, after that game, I had a chance to watch Sean graduate. I had a chance to watch Ben graduate downtown Youngstown. And to go back one more down, I wish I would have went on and finished out and got my degree, and that would have probably topped off everything for me.
In your sentiments of that, sometimes those that forge the path don't get to see the road that gets built behind it. In your case, I think you just served as a example of what's possible. And you made the lane a little bit wider for those that were coming behind you with less bumps and bruises to go through. The measure of a man is how his friends and his family feel about him. And I think, in that regard, people always have good, positive things to say about you. I unfortunately missed the great period of getting to see you as a high school athlete, but thank goodness for, the internet and being able to see you in your prime and just how dynamic you were as a player. But listening to your conversation and hearing what's important to you and what stands out to you, the person is more valuable than the player. So I appreciate you giving me the time to, hear your experience and, add to our platform by providing your story amongst the litany of players that have played on those fields around the city and around the state. And, I wouldn't put anybody above you, you top of the top in my book.